When you spend time in the forest, do you ever pause to wonder just how small worlds can be and just how tiny some of our tiniest neighbors are? The truth is that there are worlds, within every mossy patch in the forest, beneath every rock, on every lichen-covered tree branch, on, around, and within every decomposing log, and even within every pinch of forest soil. Hi, my name is Rich Hanlon. I'm your Wild Neighbors Nature Connection Nature Guide. And for this episode of Small Worlds, Tiny Neighbors, I invite you for an adventure at the pond at Round Top Park in Athens, Pennsylvania, where we are going to take a look at the worlds within worlds that exist in the pond right behind me here. I can see some green spots. There's definitely a lot of algae growing here. And where there is algae, there's typically a lot of different microorganisms that we can get a look at. And in order to do this, I will need a container to gather some water as well as some algae. And then we're going to take this trip back to my house where I have my microscope set up. And we'll get a look at some of these organisms like Euglenas and Rotifers and others. We'll get close-up looks at some of these animals that are just totally fascinating and may seem otherworldly. Let's take a walk to the edge of the pond and see if we can find a good spot where we're able to get close enough to collect some samples of water and algae. Well, this seems as good a spot as any. We have some algae here. We'll gather up some algae and put it in our container, as well as some water from around the algae. Maybe a little extra sprig there. I think we might have a couple of different species of algae here, and there are definitely some tiny microorganisms swimming around within this sample. Now that I've brought our sample back to the house where I have my microscope, we can take a look at this world within worlds at between 40 and 1,000 times magnification. That's what this microscope will allow us to see. Now, taking a look at our sample, I can tell that there's at least one larger organism in here that is not a microinvertebrate, it's a macroinvertebrate. There's a damselfly larva in here, and I'm just going to use the 30x magnification on our hand lens to allow us to get a look at that one. This is our aquatic macroinvertebrate, known as the damselfly larva. Of course, the damselfly is kind of like a dragonfly. They'll live most of their life in the water as an aquatic larvae, and at the right time, the damselfly will shed its exoskeleton for the last time and leave the water's surface and take to the sky. But for now, the damselfly is the apex predator of its environment, and those little creatures you see floating around it, copepods and Daphnia, are probably, well, most definitely on the menu. And now taking a closer look at the Daphnia and the copepods the one with a jumpy motion, and the Daphnia are the little oval ones with a kind of very smooth motion through the water. Here's a close-up look at a copepod moving from the head towards the tail. Copepods primarily eat phytoplankton that they find in their aquatic environments. And here's a close-up look at a Daphnia. You can see the head on the upper left side where the eye spots are, and you may also see the arms flick up and down. It uses those arms to gather small suspended particles in the water like algae, bacteria, other organic particles that it will consume. Now I'm going to get my tweezers. I'm going to open our lid to our sample container. I have a slide here, a microscope slide. What I'm going to do is take a piece of this algae, and we just need a little piece, nothing too big. You'll be amazed at how much there is to see in a tiny piece of algae. So to make sure this is nice and wet, we need it to have a drop of water with it. There we go. Okay, so you can see we have our sample with a little bit of drop of water around it. And I'll put our microscope slide cover on top there. And now we're ready to take a peek at this sample through the microscope. This is at 40x magnification. You may be able to see some small, what look like tiny little dots moving back and forth. Now at 100x magnification, those tiny dots may look a little bigger as you see them moving back and forth among the algae strands. Now at 400x magnification, we're able to see the individual cells that make up the algae plant, as well as the actual shapes and structures of the bodies of these microorganisms. Now at 1000x magnification, things get very interesting when things we hadn't been able to see at all before become visible to us. Like these square-shaped diatoms. Diatoms are photosynthetic protists with silicate shells. They come in many different shapes. They can be found in both salt and fresh water, and diatoms have huge roles to play in the transfer of energy and nutrients through ecosystems. This little neighbor is a rotifer. Rotifers eat small organic particles as well as dead bacteria and small pieces of algae. If you look closely, you can see that it has a slender foot that it uses to attach itself to the algae, which is on its left. And on the right side of the rotifer's body, you can see it has that kind of oval-shaped mouth part. And that is the area through which it's filtering water to take in the food particles that it's looking for. And you can see some little filamentous like hairs around the edge of the mouth, and that helps to filter out the particles that are too big from the particles that can actually be consumed. Looking at all these microorganisms confirms to me that I have an active imagination. This next clip, it's likely totally fictional. I'm almost certain rotifers don't sound like this, but I imagined myself at a Rotifer Opera, and this is what I imagine the Rotifer Opera might sound like. And now it brings me great pleasure to introduce you to a strange and amazing microorganism who goes by the name Euglena. One of the truly incredible abilities that Euglena has is that while Euglena is able to consume algae and things like amoeba for food, it also has the ability to ingest algae without digesting algae. In fact, the Euglena, you notice its emerald green color. It's the same as a lot of the algae. It forms a symbiotic relationship with algae. And the algae that has become a part of its body gifts the Euglena with energy produced through photosynthesis, while the Euglena provides protection for the algae that has become a part of its body, because the algae that is living inside of Euglena is not able to be preyed upon by algae-eating microorganisms. That's a pretty cool, mutually beneficial relationship. Let me remind you, we're looking at 1,000 times magnification here. There are two green microorganisms, one to the top left corner, one to the bottom right corner. But if you look, watch, there's going to be a smaller thing that spirals. Oh, There it is, spiraling in the middle of the screen, going around once, around twice. And now we're back to looking at Daphne and copepod under 30x. These are massive compared to some of the microorganisms we've seen, like Euglena and rotifers. Now that we've completed our observations, I'm back at Round Top Park at the same pond where we collected this sample. It's important to return our sample to the same body of water where we first gathered it, because that helps to reduce the spread of exotic invasive plants and animals throughout the ecosystem. Every tuft of algae and every pool of water really does present worlds within worlds. And even though these aquatic worlds within worlds are tiny, they are important parts of the ecosystem. And knowing that our health is directly intertwined with the health of the ecosystems within which we live, I wonder how it will impact our living. The more we become aware of just how small worlds can be and just how tiny some of our tiniest neighbors are. Now you can go and explore the worlds within worlds of a pond or other body of water near you. And if you would like to share your discoveries, you can go on to the Wild Neighbors Nature Connection Facebook page and make a post. I would love to hear from you. I thank you for joining me today. I'll see you next time.